finances and audits. And so I'm going to turn it over to David Hempel to begin. Everyone, please mute yourself if you haven't.
Okay, very good. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yeah, I hear you, David.
Okay, good. Well, good evening. I know everyone became a trustee for these audit talks, so let's get to it. Next month, the library will receive the audit for the 2019 fiscal year and will timely file it with the Office of the State Auditor. Our goal is to feel comfortable looking at an audit and understand the results. Now, what we know is external independent financial audits are just warm and fuzzy feel-good reports. When columns of numbers add up and reconcile, it can just warm a trustee's heart. Then when a completely unrelated person says, hey, those are good numbers, well, we can go to town with that. So, if that's not enough incentive, then I need you to remember that it is the responsibility of every member of the governing board to ensure that the organization is playing by the rules. This means verifying that there is appropriate and transparent use of other people's money. The Finance Committee may take the lead and supervise these processes, but they need the support and confidence of the entire board. We'll look at part of the library audit from the 2018 in a few minutes, which in total is 40 pages and a letter. 40 pages of an audit can be daunting to read, but you should be relieved to know that you do not need to scour every page. And I'll give you a spoiler alert right now. There's only one statement in the audit to know what the results of the audit are. But we'll get to that in a few minutes when we look at an example. Generally, I wanted to tell you that audits may be required by statute or law for entities like special taxing districts, or needed to satisfy donors and grantors, or to assure stakeholders. Auditors use analytic and forensic techniques to sample data, but this does not include verifying each and every transaction, unless the sampling suggests further investigation. They'll use tests like substantive tests of transactions and various other names. The techniques used can vary depending on the auditor's confidence in things like the strength of the internal controls. And generally, audits don't uncover fraud unless they're specifically initiated to look for it. They're more of a confidence builder, or at least a deterrent for people. So audits generally are good things, and for wonks like accountants, they are feel-good documents. So at this part, let's look at some of the key parts. And Joanna, if you could put up that first page.
Okay, I'm doing that now. Just a minute. Do you see it?
I do not yet.
I have it on the screen.
Do others see it? I do not.
I wonder if it's behind, if you'd like to reduce the size of the tab you have for Zoom, it might be behind your Zoom.
If others can see it, that's fine. I have a copy here.
I can see it.
No, I can't see it either. I'm just seeing the Explorer page.
That's what I'm seeing.
Oh, interesting. Let me, okay.
Joanna, may I ask a question of the group? Can you guys grab the bottom right-hand corner of your, whatever your browser is, and reduce the size of it? I believe it opened another screen, sharing the document. No, okay.
No, that's not helping me.
Okay, Joanna.
Let me stop it and start again. Okay. So, okay, we'll try again here. Do you see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Okay, good. Okay. The first key part of an audit that we want to look at is the independent auditor's report. Now, if you do not read anything else in an audit, this is a document you should read. It's usually at the beginning before the financial reports, but it can come after. This tells whether the numbers are accurate and whether you should have any concerns. Reports like this usually have three parts, starting with an introduction that will cover the time period of the audit and who is responsible for the financial statements. And in other words, it is the management and not the auditor. The auditor's report is only a subjective opinion based on those tests that they performed. So, and again, we'll look at an example of the library share in a few minutes. The next section will usually deal with the scope about how the audit is carried out using generally accepted audit standards to be reasonably sure that the financial statements are free from material misstatements. Now let me say something real quick about material misstatements. Material versus immaterial is a relative term, and it's where the auditor's opinion comes in. A $10,000 expense misstatement for an organization that has a $40,000 budget is a very material misstatement. But for an organization that may have a $4 million budget, the auditor may deem it as immaterial. It really is the auditor's determination if it affects materially the financial statements. So, and then the third section is the auditor's opinions. And this is where the action is. A clean, unqualified opinion is the best result. A standard auditor's report with no qualifiers or red flags that limits the auditor's opinion. If the auditors do not find any material problems with the statements, they will issue an unqualified audit report that will simply say that these statements are prepared in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles or similar language. That is the phrase that you want to see. That is a clean audit report. It doesn't mean it's perfect. It doesn't mean that there wasn't some immaterial misstatements. It just says that the auditor believes that the information provides adequate financial reports for that organization. But again, the clean, unqualified opinion is where we want to what we want to see, and that's what the library has received. The next possibility is called a qualified opinion, a non-standard auditor's report, and has an issue with or a problem that the auditor will explain in a qualified auditor's report. The auditor will qualify their opinion and note the problem areas. In this case, you should read the discussion of the problems in the management discussion and analysis and the notes to the financial statements. It could be something more serious, or it could be simply referring to a different auditor's work that they're not haven't certified, or accounting policy change, material uncertainties, but not enough to affect, or specific disclosures. But it's kind of a middle of the road saying everything's not perfect, but it's not a bad report. So, and the third option of opinions is adverse opinion. Don't want to see that. Auditor found inappropriate misstatements or policies that materially affect the veracity of the reports. The auditor feels the data is unreliable or purposely misleading. This is when the entire governing board must be proactive in resolving the problems and deal with them appropriately. And again, you might see some of that most organizations would not want to get to this position. During the audit process or before, they would probably work with the auditor to try to clear up some of those problems, because especially for a for-profit organization, an adverse opinion can be quite a serious problem. And for our organization, it also can be a serious problem, but we won't ever see that, I think. So let's go ahead and look at the example, and Joanna, if you could now move to the second page file.
Okay.
This will be the independent auditor's report from the library's 2018 audit.
Does everyone see that?
No, we're back to the Explorer screen.
All right.
David, we might, can we stop right here and see if there are any questions about what you've shared so far?
Sure.
So if anyone has any questions, you want to raise your hand, you want to make a comment?
Bill, are you raising your hand?
You need
Bill,
to
you're
unmute
muted.
yourself, Bill, if you want to say something.
Sorry, what kind of problems would cause, just a couple of examples, would cause a qualified report?
Again, a miscategorization of expenses that don't materially affect the reports, more minor issues of that nature. I might even ask Cindy what her experience would be with that. If you have any simple examples of that.
Claudine, I think, gave the example on a prior audit. One of the auditors was not satisfied with the way we conducted our book inventory. But our book inventory was done as all other libraries done and in a reasonable manner. And I think he was finally convinced of that. But Claudine, did he actually issue a qualified report?
I believe so. And we're talking probably 14 years ago. But yes, I believe he did, because we were all astonished. And that's probably when I created the network that we have with the Front Range finance officers, or because I said, I need to know what you all are doing, because we just got a qualified opinion. And they came in like a SWAT team and explained, no, we sample the books. We don't use the catalog system as an accounting system, which is what that auditor had hoped for. So thanks, Cindy.
That's a very good example of something that is not something that doesn't materially affect the books, but a disagreement between auditors on how to handle certain situations.
Thank you, David. Yes, it was a legitimate disagreement between management and the auditor.
Okay, good question. Anybody else have anything? Ann?
I'm listening.
Okay. All right, well, we'll mute ourselves again and let David continue.
And Joanna, if you're able to get that page 2 up. Looks like it's loading. Okay, good. This is a copy of the 2018, which is the last audit that the library has. Kind of goes with what we just discussed in the 3 sections. The first couple paragraphs are the introduction. And as I said, all the words are important for the logistics, but you can really parse it down to some of the highlighted things I have here. In the introduction, it talks about the year covered, and management is responsible for the preparation of these reports. As you move on down, the next, I think, 3 paragraphs deal with the scope. You can see in the highlighted, the auditor's responsibility is to express an opinion in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America. Performing procedures to obtain audit evidence, that's the analytic and forensic procedures. The auditor considers internal control, but not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on the effectiveness of those internal controls. You'd have to have a specific engagement in the engagement for the audit, defining that you would want that kind of audit on the internal controls too. They use them for their work, but it's not something that they will express an opinion on. And the bottom sentence on this page, we believe that the audit evidence we have obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for our audit opinions. A very important sentence. It's a sense that they got all the information they need to give an unqualified opinion or any opinion at all. All important stuff, but the next section here on page 2 is the opinion section. And this is the sentence you want to see. In our opinion, virtue above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. That last phrase is referring to GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, the standard, and we may say a little bit about that later, but this is what you'll see in audit. This is the outcome, that the auditor was very satisfied with the data received and the cooperation received, and could verify in their opinion that, as it says, the financial statements reflect fairly in all material respects the respective financial position. So at this point, we could have more questions, or we can go on to other key parts of the audit. But again, I'll reemphasize, if you do nothing else, read the independent auditor's report. That will give you the results of the audit and let you know how much more you really need to do this, or trust your wonderful finance committee. So.
Very good. I think we can continue, Dave. Go ahead.
Okay. Joanna, if you could go ahead and now try to switch it to page 3. Exactly. This is the second part we referred to. It will usually come after the auditor's report, the management's discussion and analysis. Required in an audit, a should read if a qualified auditor's report is issued. This is a place to get insight into the problems found in the audit and the management's responses and actions, and other information discussed to give perspective. Now, regarding the library's audit, though no problems were found, the library's management's discussion and analysis is a more detailed report with additional notes to the financial statements, giving perspective for government-wide financials and fund financial statements. More refers to our type of entity and what another organization, GASB, the Government Accounting Standards Boards, kind of requires. And we'll look at more of that too, but it's just, I wanted to point out that if you look at the library's audit, it's a little bit more detailed management discussion and analysis, especially with one that was found no problems. So do look at that, but it's required and it should read if there is any questions at all in the independent auditor's report. Then the next section that usually is after the financial statements, the notes to the financial statements, usually starts with a summary of significant accounting policies, presentation details of the financial statements, accounting policy of how assets, depreciation, liabilities, pensions are handled, and other notes to give a context of major aspects of the organization's operations. Now, for the library, this includes 10 pages of the detailed analysis of pensions and what's called other post-employment benefits liabilities. This is an important but a complex section, and you're not expected to understand all this, but because I will admit this is a very difficult step for me too. It's high out. And I'll give you, Cindy provided a really good analogy that I want to give you about this. The library pension and post-employment benefit liabilities middle parents of a 4-year-old child planning for a child's college education. Number one, they have a plan. Number two, the plan fits their financial situation. Number three, they faithfully follow that plan in making contributions to the college fund. How this relates to the library is a government employer whose pension and other post-employment benefits plans rely on actuaries to calculate the annual contributions that are needed to pay the promised future benefits. The library has a plan. Number two, while the library's percentage of contributions is not small, the amount is feasible given their financial circumstances. The plan fits the library's financial situation. And number three, the library faithfully, as required, submits all contributions within 5 days of every payroll. The library faithfully follows the plan. Now, with confidence in these parameters, the details are up to the actuaries and auditors, is what I'll say. A very important, complex part of the audit, 10 pages in the library's situation. But I just wanted to point out that while it's there and you need to know it's there, it's not something that you need to read in detail and understand fully, because even financial people have a hard time with the actuary predictions and reconciling them with other things. So, but still a very important part of the audit. Then there's other matters, kind of a requirement of GASP, of the management discussion and analysis, and the required some information. It helps put financial statements in context with the history or the economics of the organization, and require reliance on other auditors' work for things like our discrete component unit, the Friends Foundation. In our audit, the auditor relies on the auditor who prepared the Friends and Foundation documents without himself auditing those documents of the Friends and Foundation. So they're just basically saying that they accept the other auditor's findings as part of our audit. But those required information is required by the GASP rules for the library's type of entity. Could deal with a lot of different things. Again, look at these kind of things. The more you have to delve into the details of the audit, the more problems are found. So really, those are the main I'm sorry, I skipped the basic financial statements. Lots of numbers. If you could go back to stuff a bit, Joanna, thank you, that's it. There'll be the statements of activity and net position. These are reports that have been seen by the board and committees during the reporting year, but we'll have the addition of end-of-year adjustments for accrual systems, as well as auditor required or recommended adjustments. This deals with things like deferred revenue and liabilities, accrued payroll, depreciation, and it'll present different perspectives of like long-term versus short-term and all this analysis that is provided with our audit. Again, all pertinent parts of the audit, but not necessarily something that you have to scour every number and understand, as long as an unqualified independent auditor's report has been issued. Those really are the key parts of the audit. I have added to the bottom some, see if I missed anything here. Provided some other sample questions that may be asked of the auditor, staff, or finance committee. You're welcome to look through those. I can read them too if you like. But the goal here is for you to feel comfortable to ask some of these questions. And these are examples of the type of questions that could be asked of auditors if they have not provided the information, or ask the finance committee, because you expect the finance committee to have read all the details. And so these are some follow-up questions that could be answered any of the persons involved in the audit, from the auditor to the staff to the finance committee to the treasurer. So, all right, unless we need that up, Joanna, we can probably go back to the regular view. And at this point, we'll entertain any questions before we move on to other parts.
Great. Thank you, David. Excellent, I think. You touched on all the things I hoped would cover. Anyone have any comments or questions for David on this?
No, if nothing comes up right now, you're always welcome to, digest this a little bit more and ask down the road. Either I or Kay or Cindy will always be able to answer follow-up questions. So
it's my understanding this document is now on our board share.
I believe it is, yes.
In the month of May, or is it in the finance committee? Month of May.
Okay.
Very good. So that'll be a reference point for everyone as we come to our June meeting.
And we'll put it in the finance committee. That makes sense, to make sure it's replicated there, so we don't have to figure out which month we did this.
Right.
David, that was super clear. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
I don't see anybody raising their hand to ask. Anne, I can't see a hand for you. Do you have any questions?
You don't see it. I'm understanding what he's saying. Walt will be pleased.
Okay, very good.
Good. Okay.
Okay. So who's next, David?
Well, at this point, I'm going to invite Cindy to maybe give us an update on the current audit process and entertain any questions. Nothing too in-depth, but maybe give us a little perspective on the two government or the two standards that she has to follow. That's GAAP, government or generally accepted accounting principles, and GASB, Government Accounting Standards Board, are set a lot of the standards and rules that Cindy has to follow in her job. So
Excellent. Cindy?
Okay, well, I'll start with GAAP, the generally accepted accounting principles. The idea is that all financial statements need to be consistent. So all entities, they have to be consistent across all entities so that everybody can understand them. They're all presented the same. Under GAAP is GASB, the Government Accounting Standards Board, and that is the board that sets the standards of how our government financials are presented and the types of information that we need to present that they think would be useful to users of government financial statements. So the audited financial statements basically take all of our information and put it in the correct format for us for presentation. What we do is on a monthly basis, you all as the board are looking at the information continually throughout the year, and then it's just presented in different ways on the financial report at the end of the year. Is that kind of what you wanted, David, do you think?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, just
And
the rest of the board also, every month, the finance committee meets and they look at the expenditure sheets and basically sign off that they have reviewed those. So that's another part of the process that the auditor would be looking for, I believe, right?
Yes, our budget is a legally binding document. As a government entity, it's a legally binding document, and the finance committee reviews the expenditures every single month and to make sure that, you know, we're within that document. And at the very end of the audit, the independent audit report, there's something called the required supplemental information. And if you look at that last page, it's basically that monthly report you see every month. It's how our budget compared to our actual and what was the result.
And Cindy, if you could just update on how the current 2019 is progressing.
Well, all the legwork is done. I have provided all the information on the test controls. We do have one outstanding item now that I'm getting back into the library. I'm going to go in the morning and dig out the last piece of information. It's not number related, for lack of a better term. So I did check with her on Monday morning to see what the status was. I did not get an answer. This year, for the first year, they are our same auditors auditing the foundation. In prior years, the foundation had their own independent auditor, and our auditors would just take that information and incorporate it. This year, our audit company is actually auditing the foundation. So I'm going to check back in again Monday morning and see if I can find out the status, because we do need to have the information in the management report approved by the finance committee before the next board meeting. I think relationship wise, David, you talked about, you know, if the cooperation between us, I think that went very well. And I don't anticipate a qualified opinion.
Great.
I would just share also, the auditor asked to speak to me as the president of the board. She had a few questions for me. I thought it was interesting. This is the first time I've had an auditor want to speak to the board member specifically, other than possibly the treasurer. And I don't know if they talk to you or not. But anyway, she had some questions about risk and so forth. And it was a short but really reaffirming kind of discussion that I had with her. So I was happy for that to happen this year.
Okay, well, very good, Cindy. And all indications are that everything's progressing accordingly, and we will have the audit on time to be able to timely file it with the state auditor. And that's great. So we will be reviewing that in the June board meeting and giving approval at that time. So if there's other questions, oh, Bill, are you raising your hand or are you? Okay, I can't see you real quick. Yeah. Oh, you're holding your monitor. At this point, I would like to invite
for questions, so we can continue.
Okay. Well, I'd like to move on to Kay. She has a little bit of an outline of what would we call it, Kay, a segregation of duties and how we work together through the financial situation of the library.
That's correct. Just the oversight of the financial information isn't a one time a year by our audit. It is ongoing by many different people and processes. What I'm going to share tonight is not new. It's all public information. Most of it is in the financial management policy. Just as a reminder, we reviewed this, updated it, and approved it in November of 2019. So hopefully it's somewhat fresh in your mind. One of the things that we do is a quarterly review by an outside financial professional. At this point, the town of Estes Park is providing this service. What they are asked to do is to provide a reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of preventative activities for the following objectives. Number one, reliability of financial reporting and transitional financial activities and compliance with laws. With us taking over the financial systems internally, the towns is no longer going to be providing this service. So we are going to have to go and select another outside professional. The guidelines, the requests that we want them to make sure they include in their review and probably an RFP are currently being worked on. It's being drafted, and the goal is for completion by June 2020. And if I'm wrong on that, let me know, Cindy or David.
No, that's correct.
Okay. John mentioned that the Finance Committee meets on a monthly basis. We're charged with a responsibility of monitoring the library finances. You know, I'd say we dig deeper. And part of the things that we do is we review the detailed monthly reports and expenditures, and we compare them against the budget. We look for trends. We look for activities that could take us outside of our budget. We might just watch these things. We might present them to the board if we feel they're very real, and we might actually recommend action. I think a good example was last year in the fourth quarter, we did our lighting project, and it was the recommendation of the Finance Committee that we actually do an addendum to the budget. Looking back, we wouldn't have had to, but we did. I think this year is going to present some very unique situations, and I think we all have to be very vigilant in just monitoring and looking at where maybe expenses are higher than anticipated. Can't anticipate what it's going to be because, again, no one's been through this. Another item that the Finance Committee does is we assess if the library is operating according to the sound financial business practices. This is can be as simple as the transfer of funds to make sure payroll can be met. It can be something like paying invoices on time so you don't have late fees. It can be very simple. It is just an overall, I would say, view of the operations from a financial standpoint. Another item is the monitoring of the internal controls that are in place and are being followed. John just alluded to it, that we actually get, it's one of the things that we look at, a very transitional of all expenditures. On a monthly basis, either David or myself look at those expenditures, look at the documentation to support them, ask appropriate questions if necessary, and then we sign off on that. I am always astounded. There are some questions, but some of it is the invoice name. I mean, some of our vendors have very unusual names and it's not indicative of what they're providing, but it is done on a monthly basis. Another item is the assurance that we are in compliance with the pertinent laws and regulations. An example of this would be that we are maintaining the dollar funds that must be held in reserve. Then the last thing I've noted is the review and to modify the proposed budget that's developed by the director, and then the recommendation for approval to the entire board. The treasurer has some additional responsibilities. The treasurer is responsible for presenting the monthly financials and to alert the trustees to any unusual circumstances or concerns that we may have identified in our finance committee meeting, request that additional information be provided, or even make some recommendation for changes. The treasurer is also responsible for updating the 10-year plan and presenting that to the board. And then David, along with the president, is a co-signer of checks within parameters. All of this kind of leads to the entire board, which each and every one of us as sitting on the board have a responsibility to understand, to ask questions, and ultimately approve the financials. That includes the budgets, it includes any projects that are over 10,000. It's not just the finance committee's responsibility. Hold on, my notes just went dead. Okay. The director has responsibilities that are unique to just her, and that is to provide background and explanations to the finance committee, any questions, or the board. There are some unique and interesting conversations we've had in the finance committee, and Claudine, for the most part, can respond immediately. Sometimes additional research is required, but she is the point person to provide all that information. She has oversight for the internal controls in operation on a day-to-day basis. She is responsible for creating any RFPs and making recommendations. She is to advise of any potential deviations to the budget and the financials. And the big thing is to why. And then the last thing is Claudine must be sure that we adhere to all the Colorado various governments budget calendars. And that's no small thing. And then we have employees, and they have a responsibility. They have a financial ethical responsibility just in their day-to-day operations. They need to report any potential financial conflicts of interest that may arise. And they must adhere to the financial level of authorities and obtain approvals from managers if in excess of their individual levels. There's one position I specifically did not include, and that's Cindy. It wasn't with the intent to understate her role. In fact, it was just the opposite. I just didn't even know how to begin to describe the scope of what she all does. I could give you her job description, but I don't think that would be adequate. She is responsible for all the transactional levels and now in the production of the financial reports. And I would say that Cindy is very much a key contributor to our dialogue in the finance committee meetings. And I think David would agree with me that the committee feels very fortunate to have her as part of our team. It's just been a real source of great information, but also good insight, and just feel that we're in good hands. So I want to make sure we thank Cindy for that.
And I will wholeheartedly agree with what you said, Kate. Cindy is an integral part, and not only her per se, but this transition of bringing the accounting in-house is and has provided benefits of being able to do my job in that now an in-house contact person to ask questions rather than going through the town and waiting for an answer to come back and not talking to them as directly. I think that is one of the first benefits, and I think there's going to be many more of having this transition. Even though it was a difficult and somewhat expensive transition, I think the benefits are going to be great in the end. And then to have a quality person like Cindy in that position has all been a wonderful transition.
So does anyone have any questions?
Okay, very good. First, I'd like to compliment all three of you on an excellent presentation tonight. Surpassed even my expectations or hopes, so thank you. So we'll open it up for any comments or questions from other board members. Raise your hand, either physically or on the screen, and then make a comment. I'm not seeing anybody.
Well, and again, in these type of situations, sometimes they don't occur to you right away, or you may not feel it's a free question, and you are welcome to follow up as needed with any of the three of us, and we'll be glad to answer any questions down the road too.
Okay,
Kay, wonderful synopsis of segregation of duties and the presentation. Thank you for putting that together.
Very good. Bill raised his hand. Unmute yourself, Bill, and there you go.
Yeah, those are wonderful, succinct presentations. As Lincoln talked about skirts, just right. So my question is, suppose we were to get a qualified audit, what would the board's responsibilities be in that case?
It would depend on the seriousness of the qualification. If it's a logistic, it would need to be discussed and try to come up with some answer to satisfy the auditor while staying within our bounds. If it's something more material, then it would have to go through a discussion process and find out what we're doing wrong, if we agree with what we're doing wrong, and correct the situation. I don't have anything immediately as an example, but it really would depend on the seriousness of the qualification. Claudine, did
Thanks.
you have something to add?
I do. Oh, okay. I wanted to say, I actually was looking through my hard drive at what we did when the opinion was qualified for the 2005 opinion. I of course have digital records back to 2006, so we'll have to find that letter when I get back into the building. I apologize. But what I do see, David, is the letter we sent to the state auditor. So it tickled my memory. Is our auditor said what we did in response was write a brief plan of action to the state auditor, so that the state knew we were taking steps to rectify. And of course, the letter says we're considering the auditor's recommendation is essentially what we said. Like, and we're working. And I won't go too off the rails, John, but our auditor at the time in 05, the 05 audit, which occurred in 06, he was auditing similarly sized libraries in the Northeast. And so he was, and we loved him as a person, really very thorough. He was trying to compel all of us to do the same thing, to use our catalogs as accounting tools for the depreciation of our collections. So it was a group effort. And so as a group, we were able to explain to him why we disagreed. And the next year, nothing changed from the library side, and we had a clean audit. So just the summary again is he had us take action in terms of expressing a plan of action to the state auditor.
And exactly, that's the point to take away there, is that to prove that we were doing due diligence on assessing the problem and looking what our actions may be, or in this case, non-action, but the process of documenting the due diligence.
So Bill, I guess my perspective is the first avenue for receiving that kind of thing is back to management. And management would make recommendations to the board, and the board would either accept those recommendations or ask for further work from management to proceed. And I suspect that that's kind of what happened back then. It was a back and forth with management and the board.
Okay.
Yeah, I have seen situations, not with this library, but just in cases where there actually has to be corrections. And what happens is like a plan of action, but then I've seen the auditors come in like maybe 6 months later and do a reevaluation and make an amending statement. It just depends, as David said, on what the nature of it is.
Right. That's especially true if it's a process sort of issue.
Or actual change of numbers.
Right. Okay. Anyone else? Comments, questions?
Good job, David. I understand it more now.
Wonderful, Ann. Thank you.
Good. Well, I am hopeful that by June, we may be able to have a physical meeting and a virtual meeting, and actually have the auditor present with us. We will see press. No telling. There are different opinions around right now on opening things up. Before we, so I don't see any other questions on the topic tonight. Before we finish up this evening, our study session, Claudine, do you have any thing you'd like to share on how phase 2 reopening has progressed for the benefit of the board?
Thanks, John. It's interesting that you brought up whether the board will be meeting in June. I would say on the local level, our curbside service is going extremely well. We will have data figures for you for the May meeting. The processes are solid. And I want to thank the board for your edit of our proposal, because just today it came through from the state librarian. There was a clarification of the most recent state order that in fact, no customer should enter a public library. So well done to the board, because we would have had to stop if we were currently offering access to the computers. So there's a big hullabaloo in library land right now as libraries try and figure out how to comply with the law as it was, and this is important, it's not in the health order, it's in an attached FAQ that designates different levels of openness. And I know you all know that it's like a rabbit hole that moves every day. So what I wanted to say is, happily, the practice of our phase 2 is in total compliance with what just came out today. Yay. So I'll have more to share with you at the main meeting. And if this is the first time public libraries were mentioned in any of the state health orders, and that first mention was our closure. So it'll be interesting to see how this, who knows which way that hole will move. But John, I appreciate your optimism. I'm gonna make you a wager that you will not be holding a June meeting in person. But may the safest, happiest outcome win. Okay.
Well, we will definitely keep in mind that our first goal is to keep everyone safe and healthy.
Of course, yes.
So we'll just, as I say, we'll see how things have progressed. Interesting driving along downtown and seeing that there's actually a police person patrolling downtown, either walking or riding a bicycle the last few days that I've driven through there. So that's somewhat encouraging to me, which I've never seen that in the past, except for our summer interns that help direct traffic.
Well, John, with the library, we have our own, sheriff safety and deputy safety, which is Mark Riffle and Joanna Stensland, who I cleverly delegated the task of sifting through all of the competing health orders to help us determine exactly what we're doing in the building. And they have truly done an exceptional job. I'm going to have to share with you the stations that it's hard not to do it right, the way they've set up the various stations in the building. So kudos to them.
Yes, Kay. Unmute yourself, Kay.
Okay. I just have to say, I used the service for the first time today, and I think our team of people probably had to overcome something that probably no one else in the country did. Did they share with you, Claudine, what was happening? I went to pull up, and right in the middle of the drive was a humongous bull elk. And if that wasn't enough, by the door, one was sitting. And they kind of skirted out and came around. And it's like, they are overcoming so much.
Hey, what a unique experience. I had heard about the elk. I did not know that they hung around during our curbside service. So thank you. That's hilarious.
Yes, Bill?
Yeah, Claudine, I'm just wondering, there's a group of people, I don't know how substantial in the community, that are really upset about having to wear masks, and that restaurants and so on are closed. Have you gotten any flack from anybody about the library being closed?
We have received some comments, and what I would say is the comments we've received about our opening or closing have largely been based on, not surprisingly, because we're a largely retirement community, people are very grateful we're closed and very grateful for the curbside service that they knew was coming. I've had a handful of comments from community members who I think have very tactfully said, I am quite dependent on the services that are available to me in that building. And what is the strategy? And so I had hoped that what we've been calling phase 2.5, I mean, I just make this stuff up, Bill, as you know. And 2.5 is what we're doing now, plus entrance into the building, but only, for example, very briefly, I'm trying to think of where Glenwood Springs is. I can't think of the county, but the county that Glenwood Springs is in, didn't do curbside. They created a very elaborate plan to allow the way, the people counters in Safeway, to allow the people counter process. And that's with extensive cleaning. And they just got shut down today.
Yeah.
So I would have done what they did. I mean, that's essentially was similar to the proposal, but I'm very grateful that we did all the preparation around what we're doing now. So Bill, there are people who have yet to raise pitchforks, but have been professional and pointed in their request for physical access.
Understandable. Okay. I think a very good study session tonight. Does anyone have any final comments or questions? Okay. Thank everyone for their participation, and once again to David, Kay, and Cindy for your excellent presentations. And it is 7:29 by my watch, and we will bring our study session forward to our May 18th board meeting, which will be virtual again via Zoom and as well as recorded. Thank you all, and thank you, Claudine. Everyone stay safe, healthy, and happy.